Hey friends, it's Mike. Today I'm going to start work on this old Ventura guitar. It's an old Japanese Les Paul style guitar. You can see it has the Gibson diamond inlay in the headstock. It also has the Gibson headstock in general. You can see the open book fold at the very top here. And these guitars are very difficult to find in very good shape. Now the reason why I'm even doing this is because way back when my first electric guitar was a Ventura. And it was a very nice looking guitar. It didn't look like this one. It wasn't a gold top, it was a burst color. And then after owning it about 10 years or so, I gave it away to a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, because at that time I was playing an Ibanez Roadstar 2, and I also had my Epiphone Sheridan, an old Epiphone Sheridan going back over 35 years ago. Ever since I gave it away, as the years went on, I always regretted having done that. And so what I did was I scoured eBay and I scoured reverb.com, and I finally came across this one. And it's in very, very good shape. Very good shape. You'll see others. You'll see them on eBay. You may occasionally see them on reverb.com, but many times they're rough looking. So I'm going to keep as much of the original components as I can, which means I'm going to keep the tailpiece and the bridge. With these Japanese guitars, the radius on the fretboards are not 12-inch. They're 7 1/4. And because of that, you can't use a typical Tune-o-matic bridge. So the bridges that were coming out of Japan at the time, they look like Tune-o-matics. In fact, they are Tune-o-matics, except they are made for 7 1/4 radius fretboards and not 12-inch. So you have to keep the bridges for these guitars when you get them. You can't put a 12-inch radius bridge on a 7 1/4 radius fretboard. You're just going to have a mismatch. The strings will buzz and you'll have height differences and all that. So you got to reuse those bridges, clean them up. So I am going to put a brand new wiring harness in it. I did look at the pots. They look okay, but they're 40-something years old. So I think I'm just going to pull them out. And I'm going to put a pre-wired Epiphone harness in, just to make things easy and to make sure that I don't have to futz around with electronics. As far as pickups goes, I am going to be putting in dual rail pickups, and I'm not going to be putting humbuckers in with the posts. Now the reason for that, and I mentioned this in the previous video, is because the posts on the original humbuckers that came on many of these Japanese guitars, they were closer together. Versus today, you'll see that the humbucker posts are spread out wider. And if you try to use a brand new humbucker with the post spread wider, you're going to see that the strings are not going to sit over the posts for either pickup. They're not going to sit over them directly, especially for the low E and the high E. It's going to look really goofy. And I know this because on the first Japanese guitar I worked on, I ran into that problem. Now the way around this is to either get the dual rail pickups, there are no posts, it's just 2 rails going across the pickup, or you can get a humbucker that has no posts sticking out of the cover. In other words, it's just a silver cover going across the pickup, and that'll work too. So I opted for the dual rail, and I'll be putting those in. They haven't shown up yet, but I'm expecting them to come in within the next couple of days. Okay, so I'm going to start on this, and again, the reason why is because it has a lot to do with nostalgia, and I want to see if I could bring a Ventura back into my collection, and I will, and this will look very nice when it's done. Okay, so I'm going to start pulling some parts off it, and I'll be back. Okay, so I took everything out of the guitar, the pots, the switch, the machine heads. And with the pots, the previous owner had some splicing going on underneath the covers here, so I think it's a good thing. I'm going to be putting in the pre-wired harness. All right, so I got it stripped down now. The only thing is I have to do a little work back here. The original Japanese tuners were these like semi-enclosed, they were like a rectangular type of, and I'll show you when I'm done, casing. And so the original screws are here, and then you see the screw holes here for the replacement machine heads he put in the old Grover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these holes, and then I'm going to touch them up with a furniture pen just to get it cleaned up so these holes aren't as obvious. I did find brand new semi-enclosed tuners, the ones that were used on these old Japanese guitars. I got them off of eBay, and I'm going to install them. They're knockoffs, but they'll look brand new and they'll work fine. And the reason why I'm swapping them out is because the original trim on this guitar was gold, and the tuners that he had on were silver. So I'm going to do the best I can to restore the guitar back to how it would have looked back in 1972. All right, so how to fix the inlay here. They are on via a veneer. So let me just loosen this. And so I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I'll point it out best I can, but right here at the very top of this piece of the inlay, it was chipping. And in fact, two pieces easily came off. So what I did was to use some super glue and the tip of a toothpick and just put a couple of dabs in there and then press it down with the clamp. And it's looking very, very good now. It's not going to come up now, so that's good. Now the other thing that I did was I filled the holes here, in these 6 areas here. This is where the Grovers used to be. And I kept the holes here. These are the holes that are going to be the holes for the new machine heads, which are like the old machine heads. And then I'll use a furniture pen. This is a dark mahogany. And I'll just touch up where I put the plastic wood, and we should be good to go. I'm not going to do any more than that. Nobody's going to really look at the back of the guitar neck, the back of the headstock, and it should look okay. All right, so I'll be back. Okay, so we have some good news and some bad news with these tuners. So what happened was the previous owner drilled these holes larger than they used to be originally, because originally you would slip these sleeves in because it came with the old tuners. And now you see how it's moving around? Not good. So I'm either going to have to wrap the inside. Let me just pick another one up here. I'm either going to have to wrap the inside of the sleeve, this insert, with duct tape, and that's an option. I'm going to go to the Home Depot and see if I can find a better solution. Maybe a grommet or something that will wrap around it versus using the duct tape. But if all else fails, that's why we have duct tape. In any case, I can't get that out. But let me just show you the good news is that you can see I plug these holes. These new tuners, when I put them in, okay, so they're not positioned exactly like the previous tuners, and so most of the wood that's been drilled up is completely hidden. The only thing I have is this little dot here, and what I did was I filled that old hole with a toothpick. And so I'll just blot that with the pen. You won't see that. I'll just put a little drop of super glue on top of it to make sure it stays in place. And that's it. And you can see how this moves around. And so this is why what I have to do is I have to get that sleeve, that insert, to fit in the hole properly. So, well, I'm going to go off to the Home Depot now and see if I can find something. I'll poke around. They have that bin there for specialty types of screws, bolts, grommets, and stuff like that. I'm going to look there. I'll take one of the inserts with me, and I'll see what I come back with. If nothing, then we're going to use the good old duct tape. See you guys. Okay, so I'm striking out here with these tuners. So these are the tuners I wanted to go with right here. Put them in. And there you go. Covers most of, the mess that's there. But the thing is, as I mentioned before, the holes on the other side, when I go to put the sleeves in, like this, wobbles around too much. So what I did was I tried a couple things. One, I tried a double-sided tape around the sleeve. It was difficult to get the tape in the hole, so I figured that was going to be the case, but I gave it a shot. So strike one. I bought these grommets from the Home Depot. The sleeves actually fit perfectly inside the hole, but the grommet's too large and you can't squeeze it into the hole, if that makes sense, right? So problem there. Okay, so I decided to go with a different tuner. So it's a vintage tuner. It'll look like this. I don't have them in gold. So I had to order them in gold. And I just did that off of AliExpress. By the way, I find that these tuners on AliExpress, they're much cheaper and they work very well. So just in case anybody was wondering. So now the good thing with this tuner is, look what happens once I put it in there. All of the junk, the holes and stuff like that, they get completely covered up. So this will look really nice. Position it here. Okay, so the tuners are on hold. Okay, so we made some headway. All of the wiring is in. It's the Epiphone pre-wired harness. I get that from AliExpress. I think it's $12, $13. That includes shipping. It's genuine Epiphone. And that includes the three-way switch. There's a new plate here. I cleaned up the tailpiece and the bridge. This is the original tailpiece and the bridge. You have to be careful. Actually, you have to be careful with anything that's gold-plated, because if you rub too hard with a cleaner, the gold plating will come off. Now, I rubbed very lightly. I have a jeweler's claw. That's what I use on this. This had already been, faded as far as the gold plating goes. But like I said, I want to keep as much of the original parts on the guitar as I can, at least on the exterior. So the tailpiece will stay, the anchors, along with the bridge. So I cleaned the bridge up too. And that was basically it. Spent some time trying to get the tuners to work, and I explained that in the previous segment, and it didn't work out. So I've got to get a different set of tuners. Not my first choice. I wanted to try to see if I can get the type of tuners that originally shipped with this guitar back in 1972, but that's just not going to work out. So we'll go to plan B, not a big deal. And but the headstock is already cleaned up. It looks real nice. Before it was very dirty, a lot of grunge on it, a lot of grime. And then maybe tomorrow, if I have time, I'll start the fret work. And essentially what I'm going to do is to re-crown them, make sure the frets are level, and clean up the fretboard. And that'll be it. Then all I need to do is wait for the pickups to come in, put the pick guard back on, and of course put the tuners on and do a setup. Okay, so we'll finish up probably in about a week or so when the tuners and the pickups come in, and I'll finish up the guitar. Okay? Have a great day. Good morning, everyone. It's Mike, and in yesterday's video, I had mentioned that many of these pickups that came with these old Japanese guitars, that the poles on the humbuckers, they were positioned slightly different than a humbucker we would buy today. So, and I had mentioned that the poles are closer together. In other words, the poles are tighter. They're closer together on the old Japanese humbuckers versus what we would see today on a humbucker where the poles are a little further apart or further out. Now, it's not a big deal. Let me see if I can show you this. But you can see here, let's just say this is the low E. You can see that it's not aligned in a straight line with the pole for this low E. And the same thing for this pole, and we'll call this the high E string. And you can see that it's not lined up exact. It's close, but it's not an exact match. And you can even see here, the A string is off as well too. So there's that discrepancy. So that's what I was talking about yesterday, about the old Japanese humbuckers and the poles being a little tighter, and then with the humbuckers we would buy today where the poles are spread out a little further. It's not a huge deal, but that discrepancy does exist. Another thing I mentioned in yesterday's video is the radius on these guitars, these old Japanese guitars. And the first two I worked on, the radius was 7¼ versus the 12-inch radius you would see on Les Pauls today, Les Paul style guitars. And on this guitar, I took out my radius gauge and it's not 7¼ it's 9½, so that's still not 12. So the problem still exists. If you put a 12-inch radius bridge on the guitar, when the fretboard is 9½, you're going to have problems because you're going to get string buzz and you're going to have string height issues because the center of the fretboard has more of a pronounced curve than it would have if it were 12-inch. 12-inch, think of 12-inch as flatter. 9½, you have more of a curve in the fretboard. Now, the way to measure the radius is you take your radius gauge. This is 9½. You can see at the top, maybe. It's printed on the gauge itself. And you lay it on your fretboard. If there's no gap between the bottom of the radius gauge and the top of the fretboard, then that's the proper radius for the guitar. And I apologize for the light here, but if you do this with your own radius gauge, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, if I take 7¼ let me just pull the 7¼ out, and I place it on the fretboard. This is going to be difficult to see with the light, but you're going to see that there is a slight gap between the center of the radius gauge and the top of the fretboard. So 7¼ is not the radius for this fretboard. It is the 9½. Now, another way to do this is you could take your radius gauge and you can put it on top of the saddles. Okay, now this is 9½. And you can see that the saddles are perfectly aligned with the radius gauge, and that's a 9½-inch gauge. So if you try to use a 12-inch radius bridge on a 9½-inch radius fretboard, as I mentioned before, you're going to have problems. Typically what's going to happen is you're going to have too much string height on the ends of the bridge. In other words, the high E and the low E, and the strings are going to get closer to the fretboard and closer to the frets in the middle. So you're going to have problems with your G string and your D string in particular. So too much height on the ends, too little height in the center, and you're just going to have a guitar that's going to have playability issues if you don't have the right radius bridge on the guitar. So if you're doing work with these old Japanese guitars, make sure they come with the old bridges, the original bridges, or at least a bridge that has the right radius. I have looked high and low for 9½ and 7¼ two pneumatic bridges, new ones, and I can't find them. So eBay has them, but what you're doing is you're buying the old bridges off of these guitars from many, many years ago, which is fine as long as the bridge is in good shape, the saddles are in good shape, and so on. Okay, so just be aware of that if you're doing work with these Japanese guitars. So the ones that I've gotten in, 7¼ and 9½-inch radiuses. Now I also want to show you something else, and let me see if I can do this. So here's a 12-inch radius bridge right here. Okay, you can see it also has the slope, but look at it compared to the top. Can you see that? The top bridge is 9½, the bottom is 12-inch. The bottom one is flatter. That's what a 12-inch radius would show. It would show a flatter curve on the fretboard versus the one up top, which has a more pronounced curve, and that's 9½. Now, if you saw 7¼ it would be more pronounced than even the top bridge. Now, another thing that I noticed is that even with the tail pieces, that the tail pieces, the holes on the tail piece, are not lined up exact either. It's off ever so slightly, but maybe you could see that. It's off ever so slightly. Look at the bottom tailpiece. That tailpiece is the tailpiece for the 9.5-inch radius. And now look at the top tailpiece. Let me see if I can get this so that you can see it's close. It's close, but no cigar. Looks like the high E and the low E holes. There we go. You can see how they are out to the left and out to the right on the 12-inch radius tailpiece. That's the top one versus the bottom, which is 9.5. Okay, so there is this very, very slight discrepancy even with how the strings are spaced on the tailpiece when we're talking about 9.5-inch versus 12-inch, specifically with regard to these old 1970s and perhaps even the 1980s Japanese Les Paul guitars. We saw the same discrepancy with the going back to the pickups, where the new pickups, the poles are spread a little wider, ever so slightly, versus the poles on the old Japanese humbuckers, which are a little closer, a little tighter, and also the heads of the poles, the screws, they're larger. I don't know if you can see that, but here's the poles on a new humbucker, and look how big the poles are there. You see? All right, so that's just some of the little idiosyncrasies and the quirks that I picked up doing the work on this stuff. I hope this is helpful. And that's today's video segment. The pickups are coming in today, so I will try to get them in. And if I have time, I'll do another video showing what the guitar looks like with the dual rail humbuckers installed. And I will try to get the frets recrowned today so that I can get that out of the way. Okay, it's coming along. I just need the tuners to come in, but that'll probably be at least another week because it's shipping from China, maybe even longer, 2 weeks. Okay, so have a great day, and I'll catch you later. Hey everybody, it's Mike. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little different, it's because I'm a little under the weather. But in any case, I'm going to work a little bit more on this Ventura Gold Top. And what I'm doing here is I have gold pickup rings. Let me get the light out of the way. And here are the dual rails. Now the dual rails I picked up from a company called Donlis, D-O-N-L-I-S. I got these dual rails, both of them, the neck and the bridge, I think for less than 30 bucks. I think it was $27, and that was free shipping. So not a bad deal. So what I'm doing here is I found these gold pickup rings, and they're plastic, but they look very nice. And All Parts makes them. So I'm using these. So what we'll do is we'll be using these gold pickup rings, and they contrast nicely with the dual rails. So it's going to look pretty sharp. I did pick up real metal pickup rings. I got these from Guitar Fetish, but the problem is they're flat. They're like flat for an SG, a Gibson SG. They don't have the tapered ends. You see here, a little low here, a little high there. And you really need that on a Les Paul because you need that pickup, especially in the bridge position, to come up some. The height of this pickup ring allows you to adjust the pickup so you can raise it up higher. You're not going to be able to do that with pickup rings that are essentially just, very, very flat. I know that's hard to see through the packaging, but trust me. So we're going to use these pickup rings. They're very nice. They're like the cream or the black types of pickup rings, just that they're finished in a gold finish. All right. So I've got the first pickup ring in, sort of. Now what's interesting, I think I mentioned this in the previous segment, the holes on the pickup rings, like these are Epiphone pickup rings. You really have two choices, Gibson and Epiphone. And anything that's not Gibson pretty much uses Epiphone pickup rings. And the difference is the distance between the holes. So the Epiphones, they're not an exact match for the Gibson rings. The holes will be off. So what's interesting is this is the second or third time this has happened to me on a Japanese guitar where the holes from the previous pickup rings, and by the way, I didn't have the pickup rings for this, didn't ship with them, they don't align properly with either an Epiphone or the Gibson rings. The front two screws will, but the bottom or the rear screws bolting it down, screwing it down, they do not. So what I do is I align the pickup ring by putting the screws in the top here, and then what I'll need to do is drill new holes here and screw it down. But what I do before I screw it down, and I'm not sure you can see this, but it's going to be hard. I put a little super glue in the hole and then a toothpick, and I let it harden. And the reason why I do that is just in case when I drill, if the hole is close to the original hole, it doesn't open it up and then make the screw wobble around. This way it basically stays very tight. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so let me finish the other pickup and I'll be back. Okay, so both pickups are in now. They haven't been wired yet, so I have to solder them to the pots. I'm going to put the pickguard on now, and I'm going to use a all parts Gibson custom pickguard. It's like the pickguard that came with the guitar, but the pickguard that came with the guitar, the pickup rings were wider, and so when I went to go put the pickguard on, it had these big gaps, you know, here, and it just looked kind of sloppy. So I'm just going to put on a new pickguard. I'll have to trim it up a little bit, and it'll fit nice and tight. It'll look nice. Okay, so I'm going to do that now, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have the pickguard on, and I did use the old pickguard. The gap, you can see it, it's not too bad. It looks fine back here, just a little bit back here. So, besides, I wanted to keep as much of the original parts as I possibly can. In fact, these are the original knobs. The original tailpiece and original bridge will stay on the guitar, so we're good. I'm going to go with the pickguard I have on it. Now I'm going to connect up the pickups by soldering it, and I did buy the knob pointers, gold, to give it that vintage look. I'll be putting those on also, and when I do, I'll show you what they look like. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so the wiring is done, and it's looking very, very nice. I did put the volume pointers on the guitar. Let's see if you can see that. You see here? And that gives it a bit of a retro look. You don't see these today on many guitars, but you can buy them. Philadelphia Luthier sells them for both metric and US threads. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. It's all wired up. Pickups work fine. I tapped them, which is good, which means the three-way switch is in the right position. And then as soon as the tuners come in, which should be within the next couple of days or so, I'll put those on, and we'll string her up, and we'll see what she does. Okay, so that's it for tonight, though, and I'll catch you guys later this week. Have a great night. Okay, so I'm getting close to finishing up this Ventura, and today I'm going to put the tuners on, and you can see here from where the tuners used to be, there were two sets put on. They were the originals, and then the person who had it subsequently had put some Grovers on. So you can see that the back of the headstock is chewed up pretty good with various holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install these Wilkinson vintage tuners. They look like Clousons, and I'll show you what they look like when I take them out of the bag. And based upon another set that I had that were silver, what's going to happen is all of this stuff here, all these holes are going to be covered up by the new tuners, so it'll look really sharp. Okay, so let me get started here, and I'll be back when I've got the tuners installed. Okay, so let's take a look. It took me about 15 minutes to get the new tuners installed. These are Wilkinson's vintage Clouson types of tuners, and they look great. You can see where they've covered up a big portion of all those old holes, so it really trimmed it up nicely. Okay, and I should probably mention I picked up these tuners off of AliExpress, free shipping, and I think they were about 30 bucks or so, $32. And they are the real thing. So not everything on AliExpress is a knockoff. Okay, so I'm waiting for a new tailpiece to come in. I ordered a gold tailpiece off of Philadelphia Luthier. I was going to go with the old tailpiece, but I thought, well, if I can get a nicer looking new one on, let me see if it'll fit correctly. If it doesn't fit correctly, then what I'll do is I'll go with the old tailpiece, but in the meantime, we'll give it a shot, right? See what happens. I will be using the old bridge though because of the 9.5-inch radius on this guitar. All right, you guys, as soon as the tailpiece comes in, we'll do that piece of it, then we'll put the strings on, and we'll be done. All right? See ya. Hey everyone, it's Mike. The Ventura is done, and she sounds great. I just got done playing her upstairs. I will do a video with some playing. I will do some clean channel work, and then we'll put some gain on the guitar, and you'll see how good she sounds. And she came out beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Gold top. Now, I bought her off of, just to recap a little bit, off of reverb.com. And the reason why I bought it was because many years ago, going back into the 1970s, my first guitar was a Ventura. And at the time, I didn't know that the guitars might be worth something later on down the line. And so I gave it away in the 1980s to a good friend of mine. And I've lost touch with him, and I wouldn't go back to him now anyway, asking for the guitar. That wouldn't be too cool. So in any case, for the longest time, I was hunting and pecking for a new Ventura. And the one that I had wasn't a gold top. It was a burst color. And they're very difficult to find in good shape. So I found this one on reverb.com, and it was in very good shape. It has a couple of dings here and there, but overall, very, very nice. But it didn't come with pickups, and it didn't come with pickup rings. And the electronics were a little old, as you would expect on a guitar that's 40 years old. And so to recap a little bit, what I did was I put a pre-wired Epiphone harness into the guitar, which includes the volume and tone controls, or the pots underneath, the three-way switch. The pickups are dual rail. They're made by a company called Donless, and they are a Chinese company, but they make very, very good pickups. I've bought probably around 4 or 5 sets of pickups from them. In fact, on one of my guitars, I bought their P90 humbucker size pickups, and I put them on one of the guitars that I put together, and they sound really, really good also. So again, to go through what I put on the guitar, I removed the old tuners, which were Grovers, but they were silver. They were not the original tuners, so I took them off, and I put these Kluson type of vintage tuners, if you recall from the previous segment. There they are, on the guitar. New truss rod cover, cleaned up the headstock. The nut was fine. In fact, the nut was cut great. I didn't have to do any work there. I recrowned all of the frets. There were a couple of flat spots here and there, mostly down here where you would normally find it on most guitars that are old, and even some new guitars that get played a lot. Pickups again, the Donless pickups, dual rail, very hot. Lots of sustain. I like them. I like them a lot. The bridge is the original bridge from the guitar, and the reason why I had to keep the original bridge is because the radius on this neck is 9.5 inches. And all of the tunumatics you're going to find today are 12-inch. So you can't use a 12-inch radius bridge on a 9.5-inch radius neck. You're just going to have lots of problems with string height and potential buzzing. So the bridge is fine, works fine. The tailpiece is new. I got the tailpiece from Philadelphia Luthier. The old tailpiece was pretty worn, and so I figured with everything else that I was putting on the guitar new, I'll just spring for the new tailpiece. The pickup rings, I mentioned this in the previous segment, they are plastic, just like most pickup rings are today, but they have a gold coating on them, and they look nice. I replaced the switch, the three-way switch plate, along with the switch, because that was part of the Epiphone pre-wired harness. These are the original knobs. I put knob or volume pointers, I don't know if you can see them here, to give it that retro look. And the pick guard is the original pick guard. I'm trying to remember. It's the original pick guard, but it has a new bracket because the old bracket was pretty rusted. I also put on, as I do with all of my guitars, the Dunlop locking strap locks. And that's it. So she came out great. Like I said, if I get some time later, I'll plug in. I'll do a little video to show you what she sounds like, because she sounds great. She's a beast. And I'm pretty happy. In fact, I'm very happy with this guitar. It's a great add to the collection. I'll be finishing up the wine red Hondo 2 within the next couple of days. I'm waiting for some parts to come in. And that's going to be an awesome guitar too. Another guitar that is over 40 years old. Okay, so that's it, my friends. The Ventura Gold Top is done. Thanks for watching.